Very good. Welcome. This is the Red Hook Town Board meeting of November 14th, 2017. Would you be kind enough to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. It's nice to see such a nice attendance. And for the folks at home tonight, we have some local government students from Bard College joining us. And hopefully some of you will be what I like to refer to as the bench, taking over for those of us someday in local government. So our protocol is that we start each meeting with showing the folks at home what will be discussed in the meeting, and that assumes that I operate the technology properly. So Steve, on the screen there is the agenda items that we'll be discussing. For the folks at home, if you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to hang on and watch us for the entire meeting, I will let you know that we are probably going to move item number 7 on the agenda up closer to probably at the point of item number 3. We'll swap it, because we have a lot of folks in the audience who would like to be around for that discussion. Thanks very much, Steve. So, as a matter of process, we begin each meeting, first meeting of the month, with the supervisor's report, and that's a monthly report of the finances of the township. I'll put that up on the screen for you to look at, for folks at home. This is for the period ending October 31st, 2017. We began the month with an opening balance of $4,722,962. You can see these figures at the bottom of this page here. Receipts of $727,434, disbursements of $683,848, for an ending balance of $4,586,548. The board members have in their packets copies of bank statements, well. Harry, you always want to ask about our community preservation fund amount.
I already memorized it.
You looked at it, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Now has a balance of $900,000. That is a fund that we use to preserve our farmlands, open space, historic resources. And we just received the amount in for the month of October as well. Harry, that's another $20,000. So it's running above expectations. Are there any questions about the supervisor's report?
Move to accept it?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We also have some budget adjustments that our bookkeeper has prepared. They're attached. And some of those adjustments include funds received from the county for our youth services. We received monies from Red Hook Central School District for sharing the rec facilities. We received a rather large amount for building permits from Hannaford. And I mentioned already the transfer tax. So do I hear a motion to approve the budget adjustments?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. At this time, we ask Sue McCann for the clerk's report.
Town Clerk Monthly Report, October 1 through October 31st. Total local shares remitted to supervisor as town revenue, $997.16. Amount remitted to New York State Ag and Markets for their spade and neuter program, $51. Amount remitted to New York State Department of Health for marriage licenses, $45. An amount remitted to New York State Environmental Conservation, $1,479.59, for a total state, county, and local revenue of $2,572.75. Pursuant to Section 27, Sub 1 of the Town Law, I hereby certify that the foregoing is a full and true statement of all fees and monies received by me, Sue McCann, Town Clerk, Town of Red Hook, during the period stated above in connection with my office.
Very good. And do I hear a motion to accept the clerk's report?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. We'll quickly do announcements and then we'll move into the public hearing. I only have a couple that I would like to let you know. First of all, we want to thank you for your patience with the sidewalk project. It was completed last week. I hope that you find it provides a safe opportunity for our residents to walk and cross Route 9. If you have any issues, please do reach out to my office and let me know if there's anything you want to bring to our attention. And again, we thank you for your patience. A project on paper oftentimes looks very different than the on-ground situation, and it took longer than we thought as we had to work around some of those site-specific issues. We would also like to let you know that there is an upcoming referendum on December 5th. That's from 12 to 9 at Mill Road, and that is for the auditorium project. You may want to get more information from the Red Hook Central School District. You'll be asked to vote on a proposition to appropriate a certain amount of money to construct an auditorium facility at Red Hook High. The proposition will include a dollar amount that includes state funding. Over 2/3 of the project is going to be funded by the state. If our residents approve of the other contribution, and so that's December 5th from noon to 9 p.m. I would also like to let you know that one of our residents is being honored this week, actually, at Dutchess County Historical Society. That is Greta Tridge-Roman, for the work that she has done with BARD and BARD students in doing some Historic Society projects. It's creating a very personal interaction with two local communities, that's Red Hook and Milan, I believe. And she is going to be a recipient this Thursday down at the Poughkeepsie Grand, I believe. Those are all the announcements that I have. Does anyone else have any announcements they'd like to make? Okay. Hearing none, it is that time. We're actually a few minutes late. We do have a public hearing scheduled for tonight at 7:35. And Sue, would you be kind enough to read the public hearing notice?
Notice of public hearing, Town of Red Hook. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held by the Town Board of the Town of Red Hook on November 14th, 2017 at 7:35 p.m. local time at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York, to hear all interested persons on a proposed local law, number D, that's proposed, of 2017, entitled A Local Law to Amend the Zoning Law Regarding Solar Energy Systems. To amend the Town of Red Hook zoning law to permit small-sized solar energy systems as accessory uses, and by adding review and approval provisions for the permitting of medium and large solar energy systems as principal and accessory uses. Please take further notice that copies of said proposed local law are available for review at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York. All interested persons will be given an opportunity to be heard in person or by directing comments in writing to the Town Board, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York. All reasonable accommodations will be made for persons with disabilities. In such a case, please notify the town clerk in advance at the above address or by phone 845-758-4606 so that arrangements can be made. By order of the Town Board of the Town of Red Hook, dated October 25th, 2017, Sue McCann, Town Clerk, Town of Red Hook. And as always, it was published in the Poughkeepsie Journal, the Daily Freeman. It's posted on our website, posted at the Town Hall. The public hearing notice and the proposed local law was also submitted to the Town of Milan, the Town of Rhinebeck, the Town of Claremont, the two villages in Red Hook and Tivoli, and the village of Saugerties, the Town of Ulster, and the Town of Saugerties. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Sue. We have had two presentations now in previous meetings that have been televised on the highlights of the proposed zoning, so we won't go ahead and do that again tonight, but we do have with us our planner, Ted Fink from Green Plan. Should we have any questions, further questions about the proposed legislation? We also have Dennis Collet from the Energy Committee, who's been sort of coordinating a lot of the work towards the draft that we have in front of us. And obviously we have contributions from other committee members as well. So at this time I would like to open the public hearing for any comments. Would somebody like to address the board? Lori Husted, would you be kind enough to come to the mic, and I assume it's on?
I didn't put it on.
You want to check and see if it's on?
It's not on, I know it's not on. Let me go
Okay.
put it on.
It's a little.
Should I just do this?
I didn't want to have it on when you had.
Oh, I see.
Is that me?
Not only is
I
the mic,
apologize,
but the
yeah.
system's not on yet.
Alright, well I just turned something.
Try
You want
that.
me to wait?
Just turn the
You can just talk loud for a minute.
I can talk loudly. I can read loudly. And thank you, Lori Husted. For the first time in 13 years, I'm happy to be able to comment with both my hats, both as a volunteer chair of the town CAC and in my professional capacity as Chief Sustainability Officer for Bard College. In both roles, we've acted with urgency to accelerate the adoption of clean, renewable energy in our community. Many of us have worked on these issues. BARD is committed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and achieve climate neutrality by 2035. Red Hook has committed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. We are a climate smart community and a clean energy community. The town got the CEC designation by being an early adopter of the New York State Unified Solar Permit for roof-mounted residential. These proactive solutions have kept us not just in line to receive grant funding, but towards the front of that line. Solar zoning is necessary, and this proposed law is very close to what we need to continue to reduce our carbon footprint, to invest in locally generated sources of energy, and increase local economic value over imported fossil fuels, to make the community more resilient during storm events, stay competitive, be energy independent, improve public health, encourage a sense of pride in our community, and encourage investment in public infrastructure. I am grateful to the people who have been working on this issue for the last year or more, keeping the best interest of the greater community in mind. I would just request minor revisions to reduce wholesale restrictions. I'm particularly interested in seeing new residential developments that may come to our community have the ability to use local, cost-effective, shared renewable energy sources. I also would like to see properties west of 9G who are in the historic overlay have the ability to install ground mounts in a visually and ecologically sensitive way. Thank you to the leaders in this community for being proactive on this issue. We need to reduce excessive barriers to installation and keep Red Hook's doors open for sustainable solar projects.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Would anybody else like to comment on the proposed legislation? No one? Going once, okay. Oh,
Good evening.
Steve?
I'm Steve Appenzeller. I'm a local resident of the town of Red Hook and also a new member of the CAC. And I'd just like to speak very briefly in favor of the proposed zoning. It satisfies, quite a few goals, both locally and in the larger sense in terms of promoting sustainability, environmental stewardship, and promoting resilience and fiscal responsibility. And the zoning has been very thoughtfully drafted, and it's in compliance, and explicitly so, with the town's comprehensive plan. And there's a set of clear guidelines which are encoded within the draft. Obviously, any legislation which is passed of this type will not be perfect. It's a brand new, uncharted field, which is, something which, as it's implemented, undoubtedly there'll be room for improvement. But as it stands, it's a very thoughtful approach, and it's an excellent starting point for sustainability for our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Would anybody else like to comment? Julia?
I'm Julia Solomon, local resident and also a member of the CAC. And really, I want to echo a lot of what Lori Husted already said. But obviously, as a member of the CAC and a conservationist by training, I've worked on sustainability. And I'm a fairly new resident of Red Hook. And one of the things that attracted our family to Red Hook when we moved here was the fact that this community has been progressive and proactive in promoting a clean energy transition and promoting solar development. So I think that as we move forward, that's something that we want to continue to have as part of our local image and identity. And obviously, we need zoning in place to clarify and regulate that development, make sure that it is done thoughtfully and in line with community goals. And we also understand that there is a need to move fairly quickly on getting that regulatory framework in place. However, and again, echoing the fact that I think that this legislation as drafted is a great starting point and that a huge amount of work over the past year has gone into that. We do feel at the CAC, and I personally feel that there are some sections of the law that are perhaps more restrictive than they need to be, particularly as related to small and medium-sized ground mount systems and in some of the districts, as Lori mentioned. So I guess I would consider the board to keep our climate goals in mind and potentially consider some revisions to those sections of the law that could be better aligned with our climate plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julia. Anybody else like to comment?
I'm Dominic Tampone, a resident and also one of the members of the ITF Friday Morning Task Force. I've had the honor and pleasure to be able to work on a lot of different things related to solar. I give solar a very important and special place in our town. There are a couple of items that I would like to bring up of particular concern, although I'm a big advocate of solar. Particular concern is the part of the law which is discussed as far as the medium solar goes. Medium solar, according to this law, is going to be allowed in all residential districts. I think that has to be revisited. As many of the people here say, I think solar needs to be extremely liberal. I think we need to have it available, but I also think we have to recognize that in certain districts, we have to look at the capacity of the district, the area the district's in, the square footage of the acreage, et cetera, et cetera. So in this particular case, the law reads that we have the ability to do medium-sized solar, 25 to 200 kW. And my concern particularly is that the medium solar on a 2-acre or more parcel might be too dense in residential.
You would favor a larger minimum lot size, is that what you're advocating?
I would favor either a larger minimum lot size. The other concern I have is that in this particular draft, the latest one that's come out and the one that's being discussed today, solar can become a principal use in a residential. And I have a concern about that. I'm for energy independence. I'm for the community developing large systems, medium systems, and small systems. The small and medium systems, I think, should be more for personal use. And I think the ability for someone to have an acreage of 2 or more, to be able to segregate a couple of acres for the primary use of just developing solar might be something that might just weigh too much in a residential community. And that's my only concern.
Could you, just to help me understand, Dominic, could you
Sure.
give some examples of an improved parcel where a solar installation of that size would be accessory? I mean, I know if you had a school, for instance, you could have a medium size, and the medium size goes up to about 0.7 acres as far as coverage of what it would take to install a 200 kW. It could be as small as, you know, less than 1/10 of an acre. But could you give us some examples of how it could be implemented on a medium accessory use?
Well, I think the use, a medium accessory use in a residential is acceptable. With the qualification or perhaps the caveat or parameter that it's for the individual use of that resident or the property owner. I think where we end up leading into something that might be an unfortunate consequence of some of the recent edits or an unfortunate consequence of, you know, understand I'm very, very much an advocate of solar, but an unfortunate consequence in allowing a medium-sized system to be put in a residential area is in fact that you will have people that have enough acreage to segregate that acreage and that they will do nothing more with that acreage other than establish a solar array. Now, I'm also recognizing that technology changes, and that's the hope for it. The hope is that we're gonna be reaching our 50%, we're gonna be hitting all of our state goals, but until technology minimizes the footprint that we have for a medium system presently, I think we have to look at impact of the neighbors. And I think what we have to do is recognize that someone could literally establish an only for profit or only for contribution or only for community service participation in the solar on a residential lot. Do I think it's important for them to establish solar for their own consumption? Absolutely. Do I think possibly 200 kW is a little much? 200 kW, Dennis, I don't know, what's that about? 60,000 kW a year after resistance, attrition, and everything else?
Well, it probably would serve 20 houses.
So again, very important. You could have a residential lot that could benefit a community of 20 houses. But the question is that the right place for a medium-sized facility? The question is, should it be a principal use in a residential area?
Okay,
That's it.
thank you, Dominic.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else like to comment? We have time.
Could
Don't
I
be
ask,
shy.
I know Julia, you mentioned the CAC had concerns about what districts and something about the size, I think, small and medium, but is there anything more specific you guys, any of you, I know there's almost the whole CAC's here, it looks like. Is there any more specific detail you could say about that, or if not, that's okay, I just wanna hear whatever it is you're specifically concerned about, so we get it on the record and understand.
Yeah, I think we're all talking about the HLO
Okay.
and possibly the TND residential,
Okay.
R whatever, R2, RR,
Or,
RR.
Thanks.
So, hold on.
it's tag team.
And again, I don't know, I have not read the latest draft in detail, so it's possible that this has changed since the version that I read, but some of the things that were concerning to me in earlier drafts related to placement of small ground-mounted systems and the fact that those might not be allowed in the front yard, which if you have a relatively large lot, really limits your placement in terms of maximizing your solar exposure and requirements for screening that may be burdensome to a resident who, again, is really primarily looking for solar for their own personal family residential use, but is limited in where they can put that on a lot that may be best suited for a ground-mounted system.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dennis, did you want to make some comments?
Yeah, just. Betty Collet, I'm on the Energy Committee, also on the CAC. one of the things that we considered in the 2-acre zoning is we're thinking, obviously the intention is to be able to try to limit the individual or the chaotic use of solar on everybody's homes, and there are a lot of homes that don't benefit from, proper exposure in order for, solar zoning, in order to take advantage of these, either the incentives or take part in these programs to reduce their energy. The idea of behind the medium scale, whether it's in residential or other districts, would be to allow a neighborhood or a community to have the truly distributed, energy solution and be more resilient. I mean, eventually, we're going to dovetail technologies where those, if there's a prolonged outage, will be able to, that community or that subdivision would be able to continue to exist if they have proper storage and so on. So there's a lot of benefits for being able to encourage medium scale in areas where it's suitable. If the property is properly screened, there are enough other constraints to building a solar in the provisions in this law that would prohibit someone from putting it right in your face or potentially compromising the community, the character of the community by just proper zoning and having that in the hands of whether it's a special permit, which I think is what we probably would want to see as opposed to just simply allowed. It would carry with it a little bit more due diligence in terms of the planning and the design, and it would give an opportunity for the planning board to being able to either say yes or no that it fits within that category. We're going to see, just as Julia had pointed out, one size doesn't fit all here. On the other hand, with the proper zoning and that, what we have is a baseline by which we can go forward and make adjustments after, we see how well it works, right? A lot of thoughts going into this. It's not something that was just imagined by a small group of people within the town. The rest of the state is struggling with this. All of these communities are trying to figure out what's proper zoning legislation. And I think we're at a point where some of the professionals that have been participated in this, that have looked at this over the last year and a half, we have something that we think is workable, at least as an initial pass. I think some provisions should be changed to make it actually a little bit less restrictive. I agree with the points about having it's kind of an undue a hardship for some people who have, let's say, 6 acres of land and their house is 800 feet from the road or 1,000 feet from the road, to tell them that they can't put it in the front of their house if it's not going to be seen at any location from public access. So crafting the language a little bit to allow it in those districts that in the initial draft it says that it's prohibited, I think is a good it's a good idea to give it a special permit designation, and at the same time we would be able to use some common sense in terms of prohibiting it where it's going to impose on the character of the community.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, Ned. And for those of you in the audience who are not familiar with zoning and local governments, there is a mechanism where landowners can seek relief. That's to go in front of a zoning board of appeals, and then they would ask for a variance to do something like put it in their front yard, for instance, under our proposed code. Are there any other comments that folks would like to make relative to this zoning? Okay. Jonathan?
This is just a question. Would the same variance apply to those who exist within the historic district that was mentioned previously? Or
Yeah, that's a good question, because that would be a different variance. If a use is not allowed in a zoning district, that would then be deemed a use variance. It's much easier to get, not necessarily easy, but much easier to get an area variance than it is to get a use variance, just so you know.
So basically, it would be almost impossible
It's
to get that variance.
It's not unheard of, but the town, I think, has only issued a couple of use variances in the last couple of decades, just to give you some idea of how challenging that is. We,
So then, I'll make a comment.
yeah,
So I'd echo my colleague. The historic district is a really big district, and to say that everything west of 9G cannot build a large solar farm without going through a process which makes it nearly impossible to do seems imprudent. It might be a better choice within this to give the same option for the ZBA to weigh in under the appropriate circumstance. That is a very large part of the town as you look at this. And there's some very large entities there which are committed to renewable energy. And to foreclose that possibility through this law, rather than leaving it to the judgment of the good people of the town when a proposal comes up, would seem imprudent.
okay, thank you, Jonathan. We did also have a written comment from Dan Smith, who is the energy manager at Bard College, and he goes on to say, and I'll summarize, it's that Bard is proud of their contribution to increasing renewable energy capacity in New York State. We have a 280 kW ground-mounted solar array located at Bartlett Field next to the athletic fields. In addition, we have studied options for roof mount system on campus that could achieve meaningful scale. However, so far those projects have not been feasible, namely requiring expensive re-roofing and structural reinforcement that make them either cost ineffective, logistically challenging, or both. Ground mount solar was our best option to develop renewable energy on a meaningful scale and in cost-effective manner. Homeowners, businesses, municipalities, and institutions have a right to generate their own solar energy, and sometimes a ground mount system is the only economic or technically feasible option. E.g., roof is improperly oriented, or doesn't qualify structurally, shading from trees, etc. And I think we know that supposedly 1 out of 4 homes is suitable for roof mounting. Solar development should be done in a socially and environmentally responsible manner, just like we do when we take the time to plan and build houses, stores, schools, playgrounds, parking lots, and stormwater infrastructure. We compromise between need and socio-environmental factors, likewise the interests and rights of the owner. Bard would potentially like to expand its existing 280 kW array, ideally to 1 megawatt, which would be approximately 3 to 4 acres worth of panels. Bard may also want to cover parts of its main parking lot with solar covering and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. These projects make sense to us, and like any well-designed building or landscape, can be designed to blend with nature. We want to have the opportunity to be able to do this in a way that is sensitive to the environment and to the beauty of our shared community. We believe our community members should have that opportunity as well. That's the only written response I've had since the one before, which was a couple of months ago, to essentially the same, roughly the same draft before us. Would anybody else like to make some comments? This public hearing, we're gonna keep this public hearing open, at least for a portion of tonight's meeting, because we're gonna discuss this item as soon as we dispense with agenda items 1 and 2, and then maybe we'll have some sense of whether the public hearing will continue to a future date or not. Okay, very good. So we'll move right on to agenda items number 1. This is a resolution to award bids.
We just haven't done it yet.
So, Every year, we go out to bid for a variety of goods and services in our community to ensure that our taxpayers are receiving the best value. We rely on the good work of our highway superintendent in order to gather the information and to present it to us in such a way that we can approve of the awards of these bids. These bids are for typical highway services. They deal with everything from ice control abrasives to aggregate that we use in a lot of the construction work, to hot mix asphalt for repaving. And we have 3 separate resolutions. And why don't we start with ice control abrasives? That would be resolution number 74 dated November 14th, 2017, which is authorizing the purchase of ice control abrasives for highway department purposes. That's for the fiscal year 2018. And whereas sealed bids were publicly opened on the 12th of October, and bids were received from Colarusso, Red Wing, and Callanan Industries, Ellenville Sand and Gravel, and JKN Trucking. And according to the tabulation and the recommendation of our highway superintendent after review of this, the recommendation is to award the bid to Red Wing Properties. And so we have a resolution to that effect, resolution number 74. And I so move.
Second.
Are there any questions about the information presented to you? Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have resolution number 75. This is a resolution for hot mix asphalt dated November 14th. Whereas sealed bids were publicly opened on the 12th of October. Bids being received from 3 firms, Colarusso, Callanan, and Peckham. Whereas our highway superintendent has determined, after taking into account both the location and the price of the product, that the recommendation is for the lowest responsible bidder, and that is Colarusso and Son. And I so move resolution number 75. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We have resolution number 76, also on item agenda number 1. That is a resolution authorizing the purchase of road services and materials pursuant to our procurement policy, whereas proposals for various highway materials, and I'll tell you what those are: topsoil, crushed stone. You can see them here on the screen too if you are so interested. And you can see the firms that are recommended for award of the bid. And whereas the highway superintendent has determined that the proposals for the following products from these indicated vendors represent the least cost to the town after taking into account both the location and the price of the product. Now therefore be it resolved, and I so move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much, and thank you, Teresa, for laying it out so clearly for us to understand and so we can make the best decision. That is item number 1. We have item number 2 on the agenda. It also is a highway department related issue. Resolution number 77, do I have that right? It's authorizing the sale of surplus items of the town of Red Hook. It seems like a broken record, but we've lost another truck due to some structural damage, and
30 years old.
Wear and tear, yeah, 23 to be exact, Harry. I don't think salt and other items were helping it along. So we are going to authorize the sale of this piece of equipment that no longer is safe for operation, but somebody may want it for parts. And that's a 1994 Ford six-wheel dump truck. And please, if you are interested in this, Truck 19, would you go to our website? And we will post the information if you are interested in bidding on this no longer safe to operate on the public roadways truck. That's Resolution 77 authorizing the sale of surplus items, and I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we have a letter to that effect from our highway superintendent. And this is a truck that we're going to need to replace, and the recommendation is to buy a used one. And we're working on securing funds for that, identifying funds, and I hope to have something to you at either the next meeting or the meeting after that, how we can accomplish that, because we'll want to replace that as quickly as possible. Okay, that's agenda item number 2. So at this time, what I'd like to do is suggest we go back to agenda item 7. Move that up on the schedule since we did have a public hearing about that. We've had some comments. We do know that we want to move along adopting some solar zoning, but we do have time to entertain, at least for a meeting or so, any changes that we might consider to this legislation. We've had comments that have asked us to consider, in lieu of outright restricting all ground mounted in the HLO and the TND districts, whether we might consider by some further regulation like special use permits, whether we would consider that. We've also had a suggestion by one member of the audience, and I believe maybe one member of the town board, that we consider somehow tweaking or changing medium size as a principal use. Although frankly, I struggle to understand how medium size would be created as an accessory use, because the principal use would be have to be rather large to be accessory to it. But there was some talk about maybe increasing minimum lot size. And so I would throw out that for discussion, and I'll lead with, I would be happy to entertain a change to the proposed code that would include special use permits for the TNDRR and the TND office industrial and the HLO. I think the special use permit review process would allow for installations like the one referenced in the BART letter, frankly, where people don't even know that that exists. It's so far removed from public viewing. I also would entertain the notion of increasing the minimum lot size in the residential zones for the medium size, or frankly for all the zones where a medium sized principal use would be allowed. If there is a concern that they would be on small lots in a residential district, although I could see neighborhoods joining together to do one installation. So I would be willing to entertain those recommendations, and I wonder how others feel about that.
Could I straighten something out first, please?
Oh, sure.
I'm a little confused, Ted. In this ultimate draft that we have now, it was created, I think, because the last draft suddenly put in that paragraph 3 saying that medium solar is a principal and accessory use and 2 acres, etc. And it seemed to be out of place, so we had that discussion. with the attorney for the town, we moved things around at our last meeting. But in this ultimate draft today, we don't say anything about a medium solar system being either a principal use or an accessory use. Under 2 on page 6, it just says, medium solar systems are subject to site plan review, et cetera. Then under C, if the solar energy system is principal use of the property. So is this new law going to recommend that the medium solar be a principal use and an accessory use?
Yeah,
Because it doesn't say that.
Yeah, it does, so
Well, show me, maybe I missed it.
So, the way you read it is that it could be either one, and C just stipulates that if it's gonna be the principal use, it has to be on a lot that's 2 acres or larger.
But isn't it required, though, that in our legislation, we spell out whether a system is a principal use or an accessory use? And then much follows from that as far as, how we regulate it. Am I wrong about that?
You mean in the existing law today?
The previous law, we said, medium
Yeah.
solar will be a principal use. In
Or
this redrafted law, we don't say anything about it. Under 2 on page 6, it just says, medium solar energy systems are subject to site plan review and approval, et cetera. And then under C, if it is principal use, must be 2 acres or larger.
If you recall,
That's all you need?
if you recall, there was discussion on this at the last meeting,
Right.
and that language was proposed at the time of the meeting so that there was no confusion about having 2 separate sections there where it spoke about principal and where it spoke about accessory use.
But we're not speaking about principal or accessory use in this new law.
It's this.
And in the old law, I'll quote it, medium solar energy systems may be permitted as the principal and primary use of land subject to site plan approval. That was the language we used the previous time. The current language is medium solar energy systems, period. Medium solar energy systems are subject to, et cetera. And it doesn't say anything about whether it's going to be permitted as a principal or an accessory use. So am I missing something, or is it?
Well, I believe that the way the language appears in subsection C is if the solar energy system is the principal use of the property, the site must be 2 acres or
But
larger.
don't we have to spell out that we would allow a medium solar energy system to be a principal use on a parcel? Isn't that something that we have to?
I don't think so,
No?
but by definition, you have a
Okay.
use table that establishes a number of uses, and I think Ted included those, Ted, right?
That's
In
right. They were
use
in
table
the
as a use.
table, yeah, the
So by
description.
definition.
And that doesn't have to be referred to in this?
Well, in your use tables, they're identified just like any other use, as a use, as a, medium solar energy and so forth are identified as a use in particular districts across, right? So if you look at your use table, that's the way you do all of your uses.
But the
You know, if you have a
principal,
bed
the
and
principal
breakfast-
legislation is this
Right,
5 or
but-
6 pages we're looking at now, right? Doesn't
Right,
it have
but
to
you
say?
have to read it in conjunction with your use table. That's
So
the
we
whole
don't
point
have to
of the use
spell
table.
out in these 5 or 6 pages that it's a principal use?
It's more, I think it's by definition, it's right, Ted, it's a principal use, and then you also have a permission for certain things to be accessory uses, right?
Well, but you heard the people talking about some are in favor of principal use and some
I
are
understand.
not. Okay.
But you're
This-
asking
this-
about.
All right, so you're telling me that I have no basis for even being concerned because it's in the use table, and because it's in the use table, it doesn't have to be in this law?
Well, I think the way it reads together, it's the way that the law was drafted, and Ted's the primary author, I think it works okay the way, it reads fine the way it is, or what we talked
It
about
reads
last
fine
time.
the way it is? I'm telling you it doesn't,
Well,
because it doesn't mention it being a principal use. I mean, isn't that what we wanted to emphasize if there are people who want medium solar energy systems to be a principal use and ground mounted and whatever? That we should say that.
I think this includes that, Bill. It doesn't break out principal or accessory. It talks about medium-sized systems and what's necessary in order to have a medium-sized.
Where do we have the uses? The uses, it's not in our packet, so.
The use table is included in your packet,
Can I ask, what,
attachment A. Okay.
yeah, I have it here if you want it. I'm wondering if somebody from the ITF
I didn't know.
or from the town board can explain why the medium-sized system as a principal use was included in the first place, because I feel like it's a sticking point that we keep coming back to, and, I mean, I'm just throwing it out here, and maybe I'm totally wrong, Ted, but it seems like you could, let's say I own, 5 acres, and my neighbors all wanna have a communal system together, then couldn't I build one as an accessory use on my property and we could all share into it? I mean, is that really very different from subdividing off 2 of those acres, assuming I can do that in my district? And having it be a principal use? I'm just wondering, like, why did we even include a medium size? Do you know?
I have to make a clarification.
Yeah.
Because Christine said I was one of the principal authors here, and I was not.
Right, no, I know you
Yeah,
weren't.
yeah, so I just want to make
Sure.
sure that it's clear.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you ask me, what's the history here, I don't have
Yeah.
the
No, I know
full
you don't have the history, but am I right in saying that you could do that, right? If I have a house in one of the residential districts and I had enough acreage, couldn't I build a medium-sized array as an accessory use and then share it with my neighbors, assuming we did all the legal whatever, to do that?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what Robert was sort of
I'm
asking
not
Dominic about, was,
certain.
in what
Yeah.
case
I
would
don't,
you
I don't think
have
that
that
would be, I
situation?
don't think that would be possible to have that be accessory, because you have one residence and you have the power for, let's say 20 homes.
Mhm.
And you certainly wouldn't have, first of all, those projects, people aren't coming in with those project
Sure.
proposals, just so you know, there's
Well,
no,
are
there's
people
nobody.
coming in with those for medium-sized
You have to be
independent
attached to the
houses?
grid, and you have to distribute it through the grid, no matter what.
Yeah, I-
Nobody's coming in with medium-sized proposals. Over the last 2 years, we've had lots of inquiries about large-scale solar, and people are coming in for small size. The number of medium-sized interested parties in the town over the 2 years has been 0.
So
Interestingly enough,
why
zero.
was it included in the first place? Can anybody explain that?
If
as
you
a
wanted,
principal
if you wanted to do a neighborhood, or let's say you have 10 houses in a row along a road, they see 20 acres behind them, they decide that they wanna have a community system for those 10 houses, it would have to be on a separate parcel, okay? It would have to be done remote net meter, and that would be a principal use, be a vacant parcel. Now, those homeowners may decide that they would prefer that to, say, a developer coming in and building houses behind them,
Sure.
and the implications of that happening. I don't think we necessarily wanna preclude that size solar development, even if it isn't being proposed now in any kind of a substantial number. It gives more flexibility, and again, we're trying to be efficient with all our zoning, with everything we do in town government, but with all of our zoning. And any chance that we can get to have a shared service, right, it's a buzzword that we've heard for how many years, and located on one parcel versus all over the place, we should at least have that option open and available.
So the only place I've ever heard of somebody wanting that kind of system is in Berrytown, which wouldn't be allowed anyway under this law, because it's not allowed in the hamlets.
Actually, that would be allowed, because where they wanted to place it was in the HLO.
If we change the law.
How are you gonna operate this? You're gonna operate it, set up a small electric power company? That you have to work through the grid.
Yes,
And-
and
and so
I
you
used to
generate
work-
electricity, you put it in the grid, it can go anywhere.
Yes, but what,
What
how
is
does
this?
that relate to where you locate the panels though, Harry? Yes, it could be grid tied, but actually not,
How
because
does it
battery
become a
technology
community?
is coming
It doesn't
along.
become a community thing. This is a very upsetting conversation to me. I've been working on zoning in this community for 15 years and spent many years trying to do what had to be done to save the community from excess development, to preserve the quality of life here, to preserve the farms. And I see this as a work in progress. We were working on it and it was separated from the board, and you took it in the back room to finish it. And I see this as fraught with problems. The medium system, are you gonna put up a 200 kilowatt system in Linden Acres? And there's acreage there in places where it could go, and so the kids can walk through it on the way home from school. This really has to be thought out very clearly. I agree that we need it, and I've heard repeatedly with almost everyone who's spoken tonight, has said, well, we started it, but we didn't finish. We didn't finish it. It is not finished, it's not ready for what we intended to do tonight. This has to go back to the bakery.
Okay, well, it's been worked on and input for a year and a half, and we put it out there to the public, we put it out there to all of our committees. We had a handful of comments. We didn't even have comments coming from fellow town board members. So it's here, it's up for a public discussion. I would again point to the example of the installation at Bard College. I don't know necessarily that's had a negative impact, but I'd be interested in hearing what that impact might have been, Harry. It's a 280 kilowatt system. Most people don't even know it exists. So I guess what I would suggest is that special use permit would allow these systems, but it would undergo, scrutiny. And it would be under, special conditions. And so this is a very important issue, and I don't think we can delay any longer in getting some solar zoning adopted. And it's not going to be perfect, and we can tweak it. But I would welcome the recommendations both to increase the size of the minimum lot for medium-sized systems and the recommendations from some of the folks about small and medium in the HLO and TND.
So are you saying that it would be all the sizes? You're proposing that it would be small, medium, and large allowed in the HLO by special use permit only?
I'm sorry?
So right now, there's a bunch of districts where there's no ground mounted allowed under this law, right? Including HLO, and so I'm just asking, so are you saying all the sizes, small, medium, large, for ground mounted, we would say are permitted only by special use permit for HLO?
I'm only suggesting I would entertain modification of small and medium in the HLO.
So not large.
And the TNDR and not the large, because I don't think that the large can be, in many cases, situated in such a way that it's not going to consume, a fair size in those lots. I don't think you can put a TNDRR solar system and fit it in there, quite frankly, because that's such a small district.
What
So
about
it's those,
so what about Bard though, cause that really doesn't solve the issue, right, that Dan's talking about here? Cause his system is a large system.
They can put as much as they want on the roof of a parking lot.
Okay, but if you read their comment, they're saying that they may not be able to do it rooftop mounted, so I'm just asking, just for the purposes of clarification, nobody's proposing that we change it to allow some possibility that Bard, through extreme oversight and review, might be able to apply for a large scale. I'm just asking, that's so far that's not on the table, right?
I'm not proposing that. I think as a compromise, it'd be good to do small and medium in those districts, but if you would like to propose that.
I mean, I guess I'm confused about why we're putting something in the law that nobody's asked for. But some people have many people have asked for something and we're not putting it in the law. So that's all, I feel like
You're talking about the
you can't ever
HLO.
predict, right, especially with something technology related, we're gonna be having a different conversation in 5 years about solar. We'll all be building houses with solar panels right in the siding and in the roof and whatever. But I'm just saying, if we're trying to write it in a way that's gonna be useful right now, many parties have suggested that Bard might want to do a large scale system, and you've already pointed out that people can't even see the system that is over there already. And I'm just asking, why are we allowing the medium size as a principal use when you said nobody's asked for it, but we're not entertaining the idea of a large scale that a lot of people have asked for. That's all I'm asking.
In those districts.
In specifically, I mean, maybe say the institutional, if you're not comfortable with HLO. I don't see why not HLO, because there's a lot of room over there, and there's a lot of areas, I know people are worried about the historic nature of that district, but there's a lot of areas where you could put a pretty large scale system and have it really not be in anybody's view, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Denny, do you live in the
You put a large
HLO?
system in many places in the town, as well as a medium system. The medium system is just permitted pretty much everywhere. And that's a significant system, a substantial system. And a large system, of course, is, Katie bar the door in terms of the size. And it is something that is, both of those things are very, very intrusive, and they need some serious controls on where they go. I know that the CAC would like to see a lot of this happen. I mean, I'd like to see a lot of it happen too, but I'm very much concerned about the impact on the quality of life in town, and that's something we've been working on for a long, long time. So I don't see this as ready to move forward at this point.
Would there be, sorry, I just want to say, would there be a way to permit a large scale in that district, like with a really large amount of acreage, so that we're sure that it's not going to be like an abused possibility, that there's just, that it's unlikely to happen everywhere, but it could happen if you had enough acreage, kind of like we're suggesting with the medium size
Sure,
as a principal use,
sure, we can.
I mean, a large scale already has minimum acreage anyway, right? Does it?
It does, it has, large scale has a minimum, it has a
10
maximum
acres.
of 10 acres that you can use for your system. It does not have,
Doesn't have a minimum.
something like 100-acre minimum or anything.
Yeah.
If you want to propose that, that would limit it to a certain amount of parcels. I would just ask you to consider some of those parcels that you're discussing. It's not just BART, it's Montgomery Place, it's, other Montgomery Place is part of BART, I recognize that. So again, in an effort to try to compromise between what is very differing opinions here, we have heard the need to, the desire to not want to exclude wholesale districts, and I would entertain that, and I would entertain an increase in the minimum lot size for the medium-sized systems. Any other thoughts, Bill?
I still haven't had my question answered, and it's not in the use table, by the way, Ted, so I don't know how we're gonna say that. I think we have to say whether medium is a principal use or an accessory use. I think that's a key statement in this legislation, and I don't think it's there.
I don't know that
Is it?
included though, because there's customary accessories.
Right, let Ted
I think
finish
we
his
need a new
trying to
committee
answer.
to put this together.
You have the accessory uses listed, and you have the large listed, and you have the smallest listed in residential. So it may be that, and small and medium are listed as residential accessory and also as commercial accessory. So, but the
And
only
large
large
is a
is
commercial
listed as a
accessory.
commercial,
Or is it
no,
large?
large is listed as a commercial principal.
Principal,
I
commercial.
So
think there
maybe-
was a draft you put together with the use table that actually did have it in that category.
Right, and I think
what
that
is-
we
what is
talked,
it?
and we had text, but then we made textual changes at the last meeting, so we might need to adjust the use table again. Yeah.
Okay,
But then-
can your use table, if your use table addresses your question, could you contribute to the questions at hand, the issues and
Oh, I
modify?
just wanna see what this proposed legislation says,
Well,
so we
it's-
can vote on it, so we can, I guess, analyze it. But I'm not so sure what it's saying, so that's
Well,
what.
it's, the language is saying that it's allowed, it's not
Wait, what's
precluded.
allowed? What,
Medium
is
systems
allowed
are allowed,
as a principal use
It is.
and an accessory use?
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
but it doesn't say that.
Okay, but because it doesn't specifically say it's allowed as an accessory use, it's not limited to that. Because it doesn't specifically say it's allowed as a principal use, it's not excluded to just that. It is talked about
It was
being allowed.
not written by a planner who's trained to write these things, to take all of these things into consideration that you're talking about, And until that's done, and we put the kind of professional effort in it that it takes to do a solid zoning, I don't see that we're
Harry, we
anywhere
did
yet.
engage our professional planner. I realize that you don't want this adopted and you don't want to see ground-mounted systems, but we do need to move forward. We engaged our planner months ago to help craft it in a way that it fit our zoning. Again, we're back to trying to see whether or not we would like to have medium size as a principal use. If we'd like to change the requirements of acreage for that, we're back to seeing if we'd like to change the HLO and TND districts to allow for small and medium, but with further restrictions, special use permit. That's what we've heard tonight, that's what we've heard prior to tonight.
Can I throw in another question? Just for fun.
Yeah, I want to say something.
I'm wondering about Dennis's, I think you had suggested a possibility for people to put them in front yards in a screened way, and that people can apply for an area variance in order to accomplish that. You have them in your front yard, right?
I do.
In a way that no one would ever see, ever.
When we
Unless they're
survive.
coming to your house to door knock for political campaigning.
I'd just like to clarify something about this. The accessory use component, saying that medium size is accessory use is a moot point in our area. And it's accessory use just means that it's consumed by the primary owner of that parcel, right? And it's associated with the primary use of that, which would be a residence, a farm, whatever it is. So how likely is it for someone to get between 25 kilowatt system and 200 kilowatt system? They might get a 30 kilowatt system. So in order for them to use it as an accessory use, since we've defined anything over 25 kilowatts as medium scale up to 200 kilowatts, it's appropriate to have zoning that addresses that. As accessory use, they wouldn't have to have a 2-acre parcel of land. They would just put it over wherever it is discreetly. Again, as long as it conforms with everything else, it would be used in that context. Principal use assumes that it's going to be, that energy is going to be distributed across multiple meters, multiple owners. Now, the image that I had in mind was the idea that a development or a neighborhood having a piece of unproductive property would be able to install solar in a discrete way, again conforming to all of the other compliance, all the other restrictions, and they would share that in the form of either a co-op or some other kind of entity that would allow them to potentially benefit from the program, which is distributed generation program provided by New York Sun. So New York State will provide incentives that they would be able to benefit from in the neighborhood to being able to share that solar and to build that that infrastructure. So principal use would be the primary intention behind a medium scale solar, just as a large scale solar would be more on a commercial basis. The medium scale solar for a community or for a development is really the spirit of what we're trying to do in order to allow everyone to participate in taking advantage of renewable energy, provided that they don't compromise other issues, which is the historic nature and so on of the community and the of the community. So I think this distinction between accessory use and principal use, it just really narrows down, Bill, to the.
But you want it as a principal use, right?
Well,
No,
that's
you
what it
want it as
says in
principal
here.
use?
It says if.
Put it in the language then.
It is in here. If you want him to tweak the language, I think that's fine.
Anybody tell me
But
where in this proposed legislation
C-
says medium
C2.
is? That's the old.
Dennis, this can't happen the way you're talking about it. You're gonna have to create another electric company for the neighborhood. neighborhood.
that's not true.
Well,
It's not true.
I know you can make it happen with the wires, but certainly Central Hudson isn't going to put it up with it. You can't put in
Huh?
transmission lines of your own.
But Dennis, if you want it as a principal use, put it in.
Okay,
It's not there.
so we have a suggestion of making sure that it specifically says is allowed by principal and accessory use, okay? Note taken. I just want to, let the folks know
Not
at
that I
home.
vote for it, but put it in.
The folks know at home that Barrytown, several years ago, it was an organized effort to get all the residents in Barrytown to do exactly this, to use a parcel of land, not in the hamlet, but adjoining the hamlet, to create a solar farm that they could all remote net meter to. Now think of the consequences of that from your perspective, Harry. You want to protect the aesthetic and the community character. So the Barrytown hamlet has a lot of old houses, not all of them, but a lot of them. And so if you throw panels on all those houses, you might have an impact on the character of that community. If you throw panels in the backyards, you might have an impact. But if you were to take all of those desires, and there's a lot of folks there who want to participate in clean energy, and you allow them the option to an adjoining parcel to create one medium size. The maximum medium size, Harry, is 0.7 acres, what the panels will cover. That's it.
Can we get
And you
back to that?
allow them to do this, that it's a principal use, you might achieve what folks who want a little bit more availability for solar, and what you want, which is to protect the community character. If you limit the options, you may get the very thing that you're trying to prevent. That's the point I want to make.
Can we just, we're talking in theory, but we don't have anything in writing. So, medium solar energy systems, this could be the language instead of what it is now under 2. Medium solar energy systems may be permitted as the principal and primary use of land subject to site plan approval following the conditions together with, etc. That's the same language as the draft of what we had previously. And then under A, medium ground mounted solar systems shall undergo, etc., site plan approval, and provided that the site is larger than or equal to, and you want to move it from 2 acres to 5?
I'd move it to 3, you know, if it takes, 5 to get Harry's vote, I'd
Well,
consider that.
why don't you, let's say
I'd
something we
propose
can.
3.
So
I'd propose
3. Would that be doable, that language?
That would help, then you'd be looking at larger parcels, Harry, you wouldn't have to worry about a residential parcel in Linden Acres or something doing this.
I'm going to recommend that Bard go off the grid and have their complete power system on campus. It can be done.
Not with this
I
law.
think he said 3.
Hey,
That's right.
you have the water, you can have a water wheel,
Yourself.
and be totally independent.
So
So
3
3.
acres, so I propose we make a change to the minimum acreage to 3 for medium systems. We clarify that it's allowed for principal uses and accessory uses, and that we modify the draft
Okay,
to reflect small and medium in the HLO and TND, RR and OI, subject to special permit review.
So what about the hamlets though?
And I'm not recommending the hamlet because they are postage stamp lots in almost all instances.
You don't think there's like any that have a 3-acre overage?
I am not recommending the hamlet.
can you tell us what you have in mind, what you would propose,
I'm
the
just-
language?
Sure, I'm just saying that if we're adding it to the HLO and the
Adding what?
TND, small and medium-sized ground mounted, by special use permit, if that's what we're considering adding.
No, this law doesn't say that, this law says you're not allowed, but you
Yeah.
want to change it to allow it.
That's what he was just talking about. Yeah, that's what we're proposing, we're suggesting it.
Robert, you're saying
So-
HLO, TND,
HLO, and I
RR.
prepared what the changes could look like if there's any interest. What that language, it's just a change to a couple sentences. Yep. If there's support for that, and I would support raising the minimum lot acreage on medium-sized solar systems.
Getting a little confused with that.
TND, RR and TND OI, that's the parcel south of Hannaford. I would not encourage ground mounted in the CC, that's again, small size lots that is designated for commercial use. And yes, I would entertain the HLO for small and medium, subject to special permit.
Okay, when you
Again,
look-
as a compromise.
When you look at page 3, you have language there where ground-mounted medium
Look at that.
is prohibited.
Yep, and look at that, and that's what I would propose we,
And,
Where did this come
given
and
the,
then what about for?
given what we've heard
Where did this come
tonight.
For, and
This
for
is what I
the,
prepared as my suggestion, and so far, it kind of matches a little bit with some of the public comment.
and
we've
for the
heard.
HLO, what about large scale?
I am not recommending large scale in HLO.
Okay, I'm gonna recommend it though, so I'm just putting that on the record that I recommend it. Also, so, a couple of things. The if you're
This
worried
is what
about the small
I
lots,
recommend.
I'm just saying that the hamlet mostly has small lots, but I don't know, anybody who lives in Upper Red Hook or Berrytown, there was a Berrytown person here, but Dominic or, Ray,
Paul?
could say, is Paula still here? Anyway, I mean, it just seems like there might be areas that you could, if Berrytown's so interested in it and they might be able to find an HLO parcel, but what if they can't and there's a hamlet parcel? I'm just saying, you know, why not allow it
It's
if
nearly
over 3
impossible
acres?
to meet the other requirements of the law.
So then we can put it in and it's not a danger.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know, right?
My compromise, I would recommend those other things, but I would entertain that. What do you think, Bill?
Well,
What can you
I've
live
never
with?
seen your blue copy memo here, but I guess we'll have to read it. But this is what.
Well,
you-
this is
you
what it would
propose-
look like. This is what it would
You propose
look
to
like.
change what is Exhibit A on the bulletin board
You have one of these?
to this, right?
That
Is that
would be
right?
my proposal. I don't know, do
And
you have
then
one of these?
Sarah proposes, what? Everything everywhere?
No. No, I think we got it. It's,
Large in the HLO? Is that what I understand?
by special use permit.
And,
I mean, everywhere else I don't think is appropriate for large scale. That's already prohibited, so HLO is my only place that I would add it.
At large scale too?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that would
By
be in
special
a,
use permit only, you
that
know,
would be in a separate
yeah.
section of the law. We have to see if we can get a third vote for some of these changes.
Sure. So, but that's my thing for large scale. Everybody else for small and medium, I think it's what Robert just said. Add it to the HLO, but by special use permit only, right? All the sizes,
ground mounted
ground
Ground
mounted.
mounted, we're just talking about ground mounted, folks, not
to the
roof mounted.
HLO, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And the T and the RR and
Okay,
the,
you do not have the third vote on either one of those proposals.
okay, so that question that I was gonna ask before Dennis interrupted me was about the, getting them in the front yards as a area variance. My only question for you, Ted, is a process one. Do you think that's the most efficient way? If somebody has a parcel that's like really well screened, and, I mean, I think it's a good idea that we're saying that they shouldn't be in the front yards, usually. But there's a lot of cases on larger lots where you could put them in the front yard and, like somebody said, I mean, nobody's gonna even see it, you know? So is a area variance the best way to get around that? No, what would you recommend?
I think there's a much simpler
Okay,
approach to
yeah.
it, and that would be to insert some sort of a fairly simple approach that could be reviewed by the planning board as part of the process of approving these systems. Something as simple as a line of sight profile that
Yeah.
would be submitted as part of the site plan drawings that show the extent of visibility.
Yeah.
And the planning board would be in charge of selecting the line of sight profile locations so that you could see very clearly whether or not topography might screen it so that it wouldn't be visible if it were in certain locations. And this is something that's a technique that could be applied to other cases as well.
Other cases in this law?
Well, yeah, I mean, other parts of this where there are concerns about visual impacts and community character and so forth. It's a fairly low-tech way to be able to do it. without going into a full visual impact analysis and, you
Well,
know,
we've always
photo
handled those things
simulations
by-
and that sort of thing.
By an area variance, a variance procedure to the zoning board of appeals is a good way to handle things like that. Oftentimes,
Well,
it's very efficient.
Yes, that it
And
is,
then
but
they
it does,
generally review each one case by case.
yes,
Like you said, you've got a, 600-foot front yard with hills and it's visible to no one but the actual homeowner. An area variance would take care of that.
yes.
And probably a lot simpler than just.
Well, no question about that, but the only thing is if you want to encourage solar, that throws people into another board as opposed to having the planning board handle it as part of a view shed analysis, a view shed study. And they could do it, it could be done as part of the secret review as well.
So that kind of, did you call it a sightline analysis?
Line of sight
Line of
analysis,
sight
yeah,
analysis.
it's
So
something
is
that
something
typically
that
is
a
done as part of
professional
the,
has to do? Who would do that?
well,
Like the contractor or a
actually,
planning-
anybody can do it.
a planning board member or like,
Well, an applicant.
An applicant
Or
would
they
do
could
it.
hire a professional
Okay.
to do it, but it need not involve a professional to do it.
Okay.
Because if there are ways that you can approach this
Mhm.
fairly simply, and there are guidelines as to how you actually perform a line of sight profile
Okay.
analysis. Doesn't have to be as complex as, for instance, like a driveway profile, and that's done, or a roadway profile. That's a fairly complex undertaking that most people wouldn't handle,
Yeah.
but you could do a line of sight profile for a view shed analysis really simply.
so
I
you,
could give you an example of how it's done.
yeah, that may be really helpful. So you're saying though that if we went the line of sight direction, it would be both simpler and do you think it'd be more effective than the way it's written now? Where it's not allowed except by an area variance?
Well, I think it would be part of the process.
Yeah.
I don't think it would replace the
I mean, do you think you
provisions
would
and
be
the conditions
effective
that
at
you
keeping
have.
it out of front yards that are gonna be in people's faces, you know what I mean?
Well,
The design
what you
review
could-
committee that we have in existence could do that, and it's the kind of thing they do really all the time.
I mean, there's a lot of different, yes, it's true, and there are a lot of different approaches. You could prohibit it in the front yard unless you can support it through a line of sight.
Okay, I
profile
mean, I might be
analysis.
comfortable with
I mean,
that,
there's a lot of
right,
ways to
yeah.
word this sort of
So it's a
stuff.
way that's like really clear to the planning
Yes.
board that it's an exception that it be allowed in the
Exactly,
front yard, but
exactly.
it's not completely prohibited, I like
Correct.
that, yeah.
That's an area variance, and it's not that hard to get one.
No, but Ted was saying, if you say it's prohibited in a front yard unless you can
Yes.
show a line of sight analysis that,
But then you're
Yes.
gonna have to, you're talking about accessory,
Right.
ground mounted
Mhm.
residential, right?
right?
So then you're gonna have to just put in something that also says, and those would be subject to site plan approval, because the planning board won't even look at them unless,
Not even
right?
small systems, that's
Right.
right.
Right, so you just have to have a tweak that says, except if they receive site plan approval from the planning board
Yeah,
to make blah, blah, blah findings,
Right,
right?
right.
You'd have to do something
Yeah.
like that.
Also, for the record, note that it was referred to the Red Hook Town Planning Board, and they supported as drafted the legislation. They had one suggestion that we consider requiring fencing around the medium-sized installations, and they asked that they make that determination depending upon the particulars in that site. It was just a recommendation. It was also referred to county planning as drafted, and they came back with it as a matter of local concern. But Brad Barkley did go to some trouble to tell me that he thought the legislation was well crafted, thought it was very intelligent, and he
What about it?
really was impressed by
I
it.
don't think you read it.
Actually, he read it and he filled out the form here, so
Got it, but-
you're welcome to check that.
Ted, do we have any reference to line of sight in this proposed law tonight? That's not in there. And fencing is separate under the usual things, and they just talk about screening under the proposed laws, right?
No, I believe there is.
So this is a-
There is some for fencing here.
For
Yeah,
safety
fencing is in the general.
Yes.
Fencing
But it
is-
doesn't
But line of
require
sight-
fencing, and I think that's absolutely required.
No, the fencing,
And
the fencing,
significant fencing.
Harry, the fencing is required both in this proposed legislation and in New York State Building Code. It is a requirement.
Right,
Okay.
but line of sight would be a regulation in addition to anything to do with fencing or screening. Okay, so that would seem to be an intelligent thing to put in the law if we could.
It would be one of the review requirements of the planning
Yeah.
board to require the site plan or special use permit.
So we would put that in under 143-37D, that section?
What, that every type of ground mounted be fenced?
No, the line of sight.
Oh, the line of
Well,
sight.
well,
This
for
is what-
others, they refer back to 143-37D, but that's the general criteria, right, for the ground mounting. It's
Anything that's
small
standalone has to be protected.
And,
Line of sight, or any
yeah,
kind of
so
a
we should do that.
review by the planning board would have to take into account seeker, and under seeker, the aesthetic resources, they can do line of sight analysis.
Yeah, but we can't
I don't
trust,
know
we
that.
can't trust that, because we've seen too many cases where suddenly one night seeker is decided by the planning board and there's no more discussion on it or something. So I mean, I think we have to put in the law exactly what we want. If we want to protect or, you know, whatever, have a certain regulation for what goes up in the front yard, then we spell it out.
So this legislation doesn't permit front of the yards.
Well, if Sarah's proposal is correct, if she proposes something that could go in the front, subject to that line of sight kind of review or special permit, then maybe that's what the law would come out as.
I'm not sure, I understand the difference between a system that's screened and a system that passes line of sight analysis. What's the difference there? To me,
Because
it's just semantics.
screening,
Ted,
it
can you-
doesn't give me confidence if that screening paragraph is in there, is gonna work. I mean, I think that the planning board needs as many tools as they possibly can to require the applicant to put in a system that is whatever line of sight or consistent with the rural character of the neighborhood or the historic character or,
Okay,
you know, with the neighbors.
I would just,
I'll
Now,
show you a
to me,
screen.
Bard is so special, and you guys talk all night long about Bard, but you're unique, you're in a special spot, you did a great thing with that solar thing. Well, but we gotta think about all the land all over the town, which is not Bard, by the way, so, you know, that's why we can't be persuaded exactly by what Bard's sentiment is about how we should have all these large solar systems all over the place like you have down there. Although, you know, you
I
have the
don't
right
get it.
idea, but we have to apply it to the town. Your buddy's letter there.
Still open?
again,
Yeah, it's still open, go, go.
Your man's
Depends how loud you talk.
sure.
It's all right, because this is perfect, because, sorry. I'm really happy at my class here, because they
Oh,
probably
you
want
want
to
the
go,
students
they've been
to
here,
hear.
they're in hour, no, because they're in hour 5 of being here, it's been great. And I want to thank particularly Supervisor McKeon and Clerk McCann for having spoken with the students, 16 or 17 of whom are here right now, and probably reaching the limit of what I said that they had to be here for. But I'm glad they've realized there isn't unanimity. I would simply say to that, it strikes me as odd. How many large-scale solar systems are there in Red Hook right now?
There are none.
There's one, right, at Barb? Is that
Well, I guess you
one?
technically.
So
qualify
there's
for-
one.
Well, you have the largest.
So there's
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and it works, and nobody knows it's there, it was by the compost pile, and you're about to pass legislation which says that we couldn't have done that, or again, couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
For the largest energy user in the town,
Right.
you're about to pass the legislation which would have prohibited us from doing that and would prohibit us from doing it again, even though probably nobody here even knew it existed, because it was by the compost pile. So it's an interesting, I take the point that you have to be concerned.
That wouldn't happen on Route 9 just before you get into Columbia County, if they want to put solar panels all over the left fields there, you know.
No, but you have legislation for, but you're using sort of, I would say, you're using a dull knife, which is to say, we're gonna ban it everywhere, rather than have the capacity to regulate by offering ground rules under which it could take place. So because you're concerned with the thing on Route 9, rather than legislating to make that difficult, you're making it, in this circumstance, because the historical district there, you're making it possible for the largest energy user in the town to replicate what it's already done successfully.
Well,
That
Congress
doesn't
did that
sound
30 years ago.
Well, actually, not only that, but it's actually prohibiting it at Bard, but allowing it near Route 9.
Right, thank you. So I mean, you know, the historical overlay, it was said we would entertain small and medium on the historical overlay, which happens to be where Bard is. Why not allow a large, because it's already there and it's successful, and it's meeting the energy needs of the largest energy user in the town? So prohibiting that seems
But
ill-conceived.
just let me ask you though, with your connection to Bard and all Bard stands
I have.
when you hear that thing, historic landmark district, within so many miles of Hudson River, isn't that, with people who say, wait a second, in that sacred area, we don't want a large field of solar panels, because it's not gonna fit the historic nature of the landmark district, the fields overlooking the river. That there could be a problem there in how.
I think there could be a problem, and that's why you have boards to adjudicate that, if there is a problem. That's why you could propose it and make it difficult, but possible. That's the difference between prohibiting it, which is what this legislation does.
It would make it
which
possible
is what-
some wealthy developer from California will be here tomorrow, and he'll grab up as much land as he can get and sell it to people in the New York City area and put up his solar fields.
I have faith
You
in
know
the,
that'll happen.
I have faith in
You
the,
know that'll happen.
I actually don't. I have
Does it?
faith in the elected or the volunteers who make up our planning board, who have the interest of the town in mind, who are from here, and who can make such a decision. I think, again, in this circumstance, something exists already magically. It hasn't destroyed, as far as I understand, because I've never heard complaints
Well,
about it.
not your example in Bard, no.
Right, but you're prohibiting that, so.
We want to keep Trump away.
No, but I wouldn't have that as what would be usual all over our town.
You're right, again, let me just say one more time, the Route 9 example, which you cited, I think had, in fact is allowed, whereas what Bard has, which is successful, is not allowed. So that strikes me as paradoxical, and, you know, it's happened and it's successful, why wouldn't?
No, that example was given because of the appearance of a commercial solar field in a farmland in an open space in our town. You know, it may not be acceptable to our community who wants to have a rural.
Right, I know that community and I might find it there, but the large solar area next to the sport field by the compost pile, which is where it is right now, which is successful, I would think that would be a good thing.
It is a good thing.
All right, but now you're prohibiting
That doesn't
it.
mean we pass a law saying you can do that anywhere in town.
No, but let me be clear, what you are saying in this legislation, just again,
Is it
by
your neighbor
banning it.
can't do it?
No, it's that we can't do it again. We can't do another one. That's what it's saying. And that seems problematic to me, right? So yes, have rigorous standards for that,
How can we get around that if they want to come for a special?
Does it make a difference
Well,
that
we-
it's an accessory use?
You know, it seems like, Robert,
We can
we've
create-
heard good arguments on both
I already
sides.
said it, if you just allow it as a special
And we spent a lot of time.
We
Is there any way
can get
could-
around that.
yes, that's what you
As
propose.
long as you
and it
don't
has
buy
a-
up another 100-acre
We could
south.
look at the information that we gathered tonight, including with your thing, and it seemed like the one argument that 2 acres was not restrictive enough, but in other cases such as Bard and the HLO, it might possibly be too restrictive. You know, I agree with both sides. Is there any way, I know you want to get this passed as soon as possible because, you know, you feel the need, that's fine. Is there any way that we can iron these few bugs out on both sides and, you know, at our next meeting, continue this public hearing and possibly have that and satisfy most arguments on both sides and get it done?
I think so. I think it's gonna take a little bit of compromise on the part of all of us as the town board members.
We've heard a lot tonight, you know, and been all listening back and forth, right?
Right, and some of these,
Institutional district.
some of these comments we've heard before. And, yeah, we can do that. We can keep the public hearing open. Just know that if we change the law at, say, the next meeting, November 29th, we would then have to keep it open again until our December meeting. And so we really do need to have some resolution to this at the December meeting if we're gonna have this in place so we can do our community solar farm project, which, by the way, is the only project that is not small proposed to the town of Red Hook. We have no developers proposing a project in the town of Red Hook besides that one. We are the only ones who are in a position to realize that to the benefit of both our clean energy goals and our aesthetic preservation goals by instituting that project. So those are the parameters, and I would entertain that we keep the public hearing open if we can't seem to come to some type of compromise this evening.
I mean, within a short period of time with a few discussions both ways, if we kept it open, and we were to advertise, how many days ahead that these were the changes from the original script could,
We could make the
Could we
changes
finish
at
the
the
public hearing
29th,
next
we
time?
could advertise and be available for December, whatever that is, 12th meeting, 10th meeting. It would give us enough time, yes.
Maybe.
If there's 10 days in between the meetings, we can,
But also, we need to make sure the planning board has an opportunity
right.
to weigh in again, so we
Right.
gotta make sure we schedule those meetings and so forth.
We would have to refer it to county planning and planning board, and I will tell you, both of those entities did not ask for additional things except for the one suggestion from the town planning board.
We want to take a look at the seeker also to make sure that there's no conflicts in the documents that were prepared today, and there may be
Why
some
don't
minor
we keep
additions
the
that might
meeting
be needed to that.
Right, so any changes that we make, we would review our seeker documents to make sure those changes would not affect the draft documents, and if so, we would need to amend those seeker documents.
You know, the idea that the medium can be,
So-
you know, a neighborhood.
The meeting after the 29th is December 12th, so.
December 12th, that should give us
If
enough
we act
time,
quickly,
right?
there'd be
29th to the 12th?
You know, I think one of the things that could simplify things is if we do away with the medium definition and include it in the large, and put all of the concerns, address all the concerns in one single category. Why we have to have a medium? The idea that a medium can be a community servicing a neighborhood is just unrealistic. And technology doesn't allow that today.
I think there's one that's been built actually recently, in effect, nearby townships have built one, I think, in each of the nearby townships of approximately size 4 communities.
There's one in Vermont, but the houses that it serves are all little modular houses, and one of them is full of batteries, and it works full time. But it's, you know, it's not a realistic way to live. It'd be all right for the kids to live there.
the special permitting process might be able to help determine the size that would be allowed in that space though, correct? You know, if we were to combine those two as I suggested.
So Harry, your recommendation,
Combine,
Control the size by the special permitting process. Say, well, you know, that's only this big, so you get a special permit for up to such and such space.
okay.
You know,
So-
and that way we just have the
So
small and the
we
large.
would
Just questions.
We would amend the legislation, if I understand it correctly, to require special permit for medium and large.
You don't even have to call them medium or large, just for standalone systems.
Well, we can have the same requirements, Harry, but
Yeah.
we don't wanna call something large when it's 28 kW, that's not large. It barely does a barn, it may seem large to you, but it barely does a barn on a farm. So your suggestion is we make it special permit, special use permit, and we adopt a minimum acreage other than 2 acres, is that right?
Well, it's just,
as a
yeah,
accessory
maybe.
use.
Okay, well, Harry, you
No,
weren't
no,
comfortable with
yeah.
2 acres as
No.
a minimum acreage, so.
Robert,
No, I'm not, I think it should be bigger.
what do you want to change? I mean,
And what you
on
said,
residential accessory, it's a permitted use, medium and so
Richie
small.
left.
You want to make it a special permitted? What do you want to do?
There's a suggestion from this side of the board that part of the concerns could be addressed by making all medium and large subject to special use permit, which I'm comfortable with that, if that's a compromising.
Medium and large, principal use or accessory use?
Yes, I think you need to drop the, yes, we're discussing medium and large as both principal and accessory. There will be rare occasions where a medium could be accessory. For example, BARD, it could be accessory. The school district, it could be accessory. If you were to have a large commercial building, for example, it could be accessory, a medium-sized system. I don't understand how it would be accessory to a single-family home.
The large scale of the HLO, I think, should only be accessory.
Okay,
I mean, I'm just,
I'm done, you know, this is ridiculous. Harry, you don't want medium solar as principal or accessory? or you would accept them as a principal or accessory use with a special permit?
Well, I would just assume they were all accessory. Oh, I mean, a principal use, you're gonna have to go, no matter what you do, you're going to be served by the grid. You can't have your own business, so, with power. So you can generate power, you're gonna sell the power onto the grid, and call that what you want. It is an independent operation.
Well, see, I'm just looking for language that somebody can say yes or no to, that'll pass or not pass.
Yeah.
So would you accept a small and medium energy systems as principal or accessory use with a special permit? Did I capture that right?
In the HLO and TNDs that we're discussing, is that what you're
Well,
asking?
you're dealing with-
No, I'm asking, is that what you're asking?
Forget the HLO.
Our fire department here has, sells a lot of the power that they generate there. And they're essentially what you're talking about. They have enough power, solar power generation on site. They have the the control systems in place, and they're on a three-phase circuitry, so they sell a lot of it.
The fire department, remote net meters, Harry.
Yeah.
Okay?
Essentially, they're
So
selling.
they are using the electric, okay? It's being appropriated to their accounts.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay? They have saved the tax, I know, because we applied for that grant years ago.
Mhm.
Okay, saving the taxpayers dollars, a lot of them. And they are utilizing that system to credit for their account. And they
Right.
are saving money, so every time the
saving
rates
money.
go up, it doesn't affect them because they're using.
They're making
clean
money,
energy.
but some of it's going back in the grid, that's my whole point.
It spins back, it spins forward,
Yeah.
but the net of
Fine.
that is approximately what they're utilizing. It's
Well,
about 100% of their
Well,
usage
it's a
being
little,
provided by.
I know it's a little more because they make a few bucks on it, I don't know how much they make.
Okay. I don't see any
And-
harm in that.
No, I don't see any
Again,
harm in that either.
what the people in Barrytown wanted to do a few years ago, I don't see any harm in that. It seems like a really efficient way to get clean energy for their homes without having panels spread all over the hamlet. But here we are. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of willingness to come to some conclusion here. We do need to move this forward. What shall we do?
Is the
Ladies and gentlemen,
public? Still open.
public, still open?
Bill, Bill, are you saying that you would never consider any ground mounted in the HLO?
All I'm saying is, we've been at this for months and months and months. The draft before this public hearing, which the board is being asked to vote on tonight, says that they're prohibited in the HLO. And why is that? That's because a lot of people put a lot of thought into the idea and said, maybe we shouldn't have ground-mounted systems in the HLO, among other places.
So I'm asking you.
Now, why all of a sudden tonight, one person says, well, I think we should have them in the HLO?
Well, I said it before, not just tonight.
Well, I don't know, what I mean.
Well, the
You asked me
HLO
why-
has
why I
a
have an
history.
No, I'm
objection?
not
Of course
asking
I have an
why.
objection,
No,
because
no,
it's
no,
not
no,
in
no, no,
writing.
no, no, I didn't ask you why,
Yeah,
I
I know.
asked you, is there any compromise
I know.
there, are you willing at all,
There's more
or
than
is
that.
there just no way you'll ever vote for something in the HLO?
The
That's all I'm asking,
the
the ground-
discussion, which seemed to be intelligent before this, was that if particular advocacy groups want to amend this law later on, because they see that there is an opportunity to have ground-mounted medium down in the HLO or something like that, and you could do it with sideline review, special permit, so that maybe in one or two special parcels, you could pull it off in the HLO district without ruining the character of that special district. Then, that's what you do.
Okay.
But
So-
not that you do it so that we pass this law today, because frankly, that HLO was created with a very special feel in mind. And I don't think you just stomp on it by saying you can have large solar anywhere you want
I'm just
down
gonna disagree with you a
there.
little bit in that the HLO is not created to be a historic preservation society. It was created with the understanding that it's an area that has a lot of contributing structures that make it a special area, but that there are also a lot of areas in the HLO that are not historically special.
Yeah, well, you're
For
wrong.
example,
It is a
okay,
historically
Tivoli Gardens,
special district.
first of all, I was there when we talked about it at the task force and when we passed it, so I'm not wrong. Second, for example, Tivoli
Well, I know.
Gardens, for another second,
You are
for
wrong when
another
you say it's
example,
not.
the whole development right near Tivoli Gardens, which is houses that are all built in like the 90s, that are, you know, they're split levels and they're ranches and they're
But that's
whatever, you know, I mean,
Tivoli.
that, yeah, that's in the HLO,
But
I'm
that's-
saying.
But the HLO
That's unique
was
area.
created by
Just like
Congress
Lawrence
as,
is unique.
I'm
to
just
be
saying that there are
preserved, like,
plenty of areas in the
like in,
HLO
what,
that are
1980
not
something.
historically preservation, you know, whatever. Second, you know,
I disagree with you absolutely.
sure,
Sa-
second,
Sarah,
are you
Sarah,
moving
it
on?
was,
You know what those
Are you
fields
moved
look
it-
like from the air, if you've ever been up there, you know, you
Yeah, sure.
take a
Are
little
you-
airplane rides.
So you're not moved at all by the whole thing about Bard and how their solar array
Bard,
is hidden
as I
from-
said, it's a unique,
Sure.
facility that created something which is good and all like that, and maybe we should allow them to create further things.
Well, they're in
But
the
they have a
HLO.
unique setting there, but that's not the rest of the HLO.
Yeah, so what about institutional then?
What about it?
Well, we could add institutional instead of HLO, right? Could we do that, permitted in the
We have it as,
institutional?
what do you mean, huh?
I mean, permit the solar in the institutional, which is actually within the HLO.
Yeah.
But Sarah, the HLO was actually created by Congress.
No,
And-
HLO is our local designation.
Well,
You're talking
no,
about
no,
the
no,
historic.
but the historic district, it's
That's
an overlay
separate
on
from the
the
HLO though,
historic.
we don't regulate
The
that.
historic district was intended to maintain that
Yep.
as semi-museum category, including Bard,
Yeah, but that's about contributing structures.
except
again.
Bard is much smaller than
That's not about the whole area, so.
Bard is modernized, so.
So, may I,
So like
say-
right now, it's prohibited in the institutional, you know, would that get around your concern about the HLO?
Why do I have to get around my concern? I got a piece of legislation that I agree with pretty much, except for one or two sentences,
Sure.
which seem to have been omitted from what we had in mind. But once those sentences are back in there, whether he wants 3 acres minimum or 2, it doesn't matter to me particularly. But, you know, other than that, otherwise, I think in addition to HLO, you also now want to allow it in the TNDCC, the
No,
Hamlet?
the RR then.
You want to allow it in the Hamlet?
That's just
So
what I
anyway,
thought.
I'm never gonna agree with John.
Okay, so may I suggest then, we've discussed so many of these options to amending the draft in front of them, with the exception of your clarifying sentence so that it's clear that it's allowed for both principal and accessory use. May I suggest, like the planning board, the town of Red Hook planning board said that they thought it was good to adopt this the way it is, keep an eye on it, take a look at it, revisit it if it needs to be retweaked. And apparently there's a body of folks there that think it may need to be. That I make the recommendation that we move forward with the draft the way it is, with a clarifying sentence of your thing.
Well, there's
And
a lot more
let's take,
clarification though.
well, it's just a sentence to make
No, no,
sure
no.
in yours.
I mean, the previous document, it had it under, on page 5 under 2, medium solar energy systems. It started out by saying, those systems are considered an accessory use subject to, et cetera, et cetera. Then, remember, we added the paragraph that said, medium solar energy systems may be permitted as a principal and primary use. So if we have one sentence that hopefully would say they would be permitted as both, and if that language then would, talk about the 3 acres and the
So you want the
Conditions
sentence to
set
read that it's allowed as both a principal and accessory use.
Well, it's like, if anyone who's proposing this law, do they want it as a principal and accessory use?
Yes.
Then say it.
Okay,
I
so
don't care how you say it,
So,
but that's just my
Ted,
word.
could you,
I'm not a draftsman, you're not paying me to be a draftsman.
Okay, take a deep breath. Ted, could you rephrase that sentence so that it's clear that it's speaking about both principal and accessory uses? Is that something you think you could do tonight for us?
We're talking about section D2, medium solar energy systems.
Exactly.
Medium solar energy systems are permitted as either principal or accessory use and subject to site plan review and approval prior to construction, installation, or modification, and to the following conditions.
Okay,
Like that?
okay, would that work for you, Bill?
Should you hear
Do you wanna repeat it, Ted, please?
Okay. Medium solar energy systems are permitted as either principal or accessory uses, subject to site plan review and approval prior to construction, installation, or modification, and to the following conditions.
Okay, would that work for you?
The following conditions are D,
What are the
2A,
following,
B,
what are the following
D
conditions?
through G.
A,
The size.
B, C,
D, G.
D, E, F, G, there's, so it's A through G.
Which
Does that
comes
include the
back-
one- Does that the
But-
condition of size,
But don't forget,
It does.
up to 2K?
If the solar energy
I mean,
system
2
is the principal use of the property, the site must be 2 acres or larger, or whatever acreage figure.
but will you have a reference there to what you call the line of sight?
That would be another
That
section.
in another section, but applying to a medium or small system, either principal or accessory use.
Maybe just small.
So just,
It's gotta be medium too.
Why medium?
Medium's already subject to site plan review.
It's already subject to site
His,
plan
his
review.
exception.
And I don't know that you want medium in
To
the front
allow-
yard, that's the main reason for that
The line of sight
modification.
discussion pertained to a front yard and
To
the
front
possible
yard.
variance thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It can be in a backyard that is, that becomes in front, in somebody else's
You
front
don't want
yard,
that
too.
wide
I think,
road.
I
That's
think
medium.
for now,
Because
I,
why?
In the
Does
front
it-
yard, medium in the front yard?
folks,
You don't
for,
think they would do it?
you can't fit it in a front yard.
We're
As
writing
an
laws.
accessory?
Folks, for now, if somebody comes in and wants to do a front yard installation, they can get an area variance.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of
I
that.
think we should leave that again, like most legislation we pass, so we can revisit it soon, very soon.
When Ted said he has a simple solution to that, and we're just not gonna add it in, just because we don't want to.
Because I think
And
opening
instead
up
make
that,
residents go to the ZBA as well as the planning board.
I think opening the can of worms of having them in front yards is not going to help us
But it-
try and get a compromise between, a different viewpoint on the other end of the board here.
I mean, the way Ted wanted to word it, I'm just saying, said they're prohibited except where, like a line of sight analysis could show that it can't be seen from a major, can't be seen from the road, or what would it say? Like, what would be the most
No,
restrictive
that-
way to say
right.
that and still allow it?
From public viewing locations, probably as opposed to a road. So for instance, if there was a park nearby or something else that was a sensitive environmental, visual environmental feature. So I think I'd rather go with
So
something
you
like that
put
rather
that
than
in
just
screening,
something that
you
roads.
put that in the screening language?
How about saying,
Or near
so
the
long as
street.
is it not in the
No, I
view
think
shed of the
that's-
neighbors?
Yeah, I think that's in,
I mean, you just couldn't plug it in that spot where it's going to be seen by the park. But you could still see it from the road and it'd be all right.
Maybe.
But what if your neighbors had to look at it? So, then what's the problem?
See,
so it would be in the section C. I think. Ground mounted small solar energy systems, I'm only proposing this for small, so it's only for like a residential accessory use. And it
Well,
would be.
V has nothing to do with line of sight.
It's
The way-
IV,
the way you
it's
took
4, it's 4.
5.
It's 4. The solar energy system shall not project closer to the fronting street than the principal
I
building
thought you
on
were
the
talking about
lot.
screening, the paragraph on screening would be.
Or even 3, the solar energy system meets all applicable setback requirements for accessory structures in the zoning district in which it is located and is not located within the front yard of the lot.
Yeah.
So we would
We
change
would
that to
change it.
say,
Unless line of sight
Unless line of sight can be-
demonstrates that it's not visible from public viewing locations.
Right.
But the road would not be a public viewing location?
including the
No, oh,
road,
yes, it is.
not just the
The
road.
road certainly would be, and we
Yeah.
could define public viewing locations if there's any doubt about that. But it would be from areas that are accessible to the public, so that would be any public lands, any, school district lands, roads, trails, anything like that.
So how would you phrase that?
It would be C, subsection 3, I. Unless, unless a line of sight profile analysis
Line of sight, profile analysis
demonstrates
demonstrates
that the solar energy system
The solar energy system
is not visible from public viewing locations.
is not visible from public viewing.
Would that include the next door neighbor?
That's not public.
Well, I know, that's why.
The public is not invited to your neighbor's lawn.
Generally, the standard is public.
Well, and then you've got the screening, Harry, which is in a separate area, which hopefully helps with your neighbors, I think,
You
right?
have
Well, that's
you have the
public
screening.
Ted, though, remember that this section is in a section regarding, I think, a building permit and does not require planning board approval, right?
Yes, and is there a way that we could
Well, that's
do
the
this
current law.
so that as part of the building permit approval process, the building inspector could refer it to the planning board?
Well, I think you'd have to import a site plan approval requirement or some mini site plan approval requirement for those exceptions. Or
Yeah.
else you're not gonna be able to, because I don't think that's really a building inspector standard, right? That's a planning board
It's-
But
standard.
once we enact this
Yeah.
new law, if we do, wouldn't that change that, Chris?
No.
No,
No, they'd have to go in front of the planning board, and frankly, you're not helping them out. They could just as soon go in front of the ZBA and get an area variance. You're not making it any easier in accomplishing the goal of entertaining the once in a blue moon front yard installations.
No, why can't the
What if
planning
you were
board
to
do
have
that?
unless the
File it in the ZBA.
site plan approval was required?
Go to the
yeah,
ZBA.
no, you could, I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, so we insert unless the applicant obtains site plan approval, and that includes the line of sight profile analysis.
Well, then you're not helping the applicant out at that point, because it's cheaper and quicker for them to go in front of the ZBA for an area variance, frankly. So, I don't, I understand where you're trying to go with this, Sarah, but I don't know that that's gonna help you get there. I think that's gonna make it harder.
Well, I asked what was the simplest, easiest way, and Ted's professional opinion was that this way was the easiest way, so that's why I was
Okay.
suggesting it.
Because it is a lesser burden from the standpoint of demonstrating that you've met all of the criteria for granting of a variance from the zoning board. It's one less public hearing that they'd have to abide by, one less meeting that they'd have to go to.
You mean if they went in front of the planning board?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have to demonstrate line of sight. I mean,
So
Well, that would be the purpose,
just let me
yeah.
ask a question, Ted. On this, you get the line of sight included in this language, and they do the line of sight profile, and they say, oh, I can see it. And then they go before the ZBA and they say, I need a variance, because it's an area variance anyway, right? I mean, you're not gonna just say, well, if I can see it, it's prohibited, which is prohibited by zoning anyway, by saying, if I can see it from a public access, they would go for an area variance to see if it really makes sense where they're located on a remote load or whatever else, that there's a hardship to the person, the applicant. They should be able to go to the ZBA and see, I need an area variance.
So you're saying if the planning board denied them site plan approval, in
Right.
other words,
Right.
then they were forced to go to zoning board for variance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Similar to Merle,
what
yeah.
are we eliminating by, what's the step that we're eliminating by having that line of sight? You think that more people would just give up after the planning board says, well, we can see, we did the line of sight profile?
I think we're back to the draft we had in front of us with just some clarification on that sentence. Is a draft that represents a compromise, and we can revisit all of these other things in short order. We always do that when we adopt new zoning, and both our boards, the Red Hook Planning Board and the County Department of Planning, neither one of them made any recommendations, with the exception of that one about fencing medium-sized systems. So I think we can take more time and really suss it out if we want to perfect it. But it seems to me what we had in front of us with the clarification language was something that represented a compromise between this board.
What did we do about Sarah's proposal that we take out the prohibition in all those zoning districts?
Well, I told you what my suggestion was, but you just said there wasn't 3 votes for that, so.
Well, I told you I wouldn't vote for it, but I mean, if that's the third vote, then that's just to let you know that.
Well, okay, we'll poll. Is there an appetite to change tonight's draft to allow small and medium in the HLO and the TNDRR, subject to special permit review,
Ground mounted.
ground mounted, and increase the minimum size of medium solar systems, minimum lot
But
acreage?
you're adding too much.
No,
Do it one
the
at a
3
time.
acres, the 3 acres, that was my proposal. Is there an appetite for that? Is there a third vote for that?
Robert, to be perfectly honest with you, I can't vote on this tonight because the discussions on both sides have been, to be perfectly honest with you, so damn confusing. I'd like to maybe talk a little more, or have a workshop, decide exactly what we're gonna have in front of us. You know, such as the suggestions that, you know, Ted was just going over with us, the 3 acres suggested there, and your thing that you added here that includes Sarah's idea of allowing that with a special permit, which could be a very good idea as well. And it could solve the situation like the Bard situation, which doesn't seem right in my mind, you know, the way that it is presently written. And that's why I said before, I think if we did that and tried to move as quickly as we could get something that hopefully we could all agree on here, or the majority of us.
Well, we've been banging this around since August in front of the town board, asking for suggestions. I mean, we can leave it open another meeting and see if we can get a different consensus, sure.
So, you know, so these ideas from, you know, as I said, from the, you know, the 2 acres, the 3 acres, and defining whether it's a principal use or accessory use, or with a better definition of that, and, you know, and as well as being allowed under special permit in the HLO and so on.
So you might generally be supportive of having an extra meeting so that we could accommodate those requests?
So because they're good arguments both ways, yes, you know, they're different subjects, but yes.
Okay,
I think we should just have another meeting for this thing, for this purpose.
Okay, so you would vote in favor of extending to another meeting?
I mean, even if we had a special workshop with the board at some point, obviously announce to the public just to hash
It
it
has
out.
to be a board meeting.
We had one of those, right, that's kind of how we got here. All right, next, Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a no on this unless it's allowed in the HLO in some capacity, so I guess that means extending it to another meeting.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we extend the public hearing then with your support until
Anybody else? before we close?
September? We're not closing the public hearing.
But some people want to speak or something.
We're going to extend the public hearing with your permission to November 29th. And I would like to let you know that the formally scheduled town board meeting of November 22nd has been rescheduled. We're officially doing that now to November 29th because it's the night before Thanksgiving and we don't think you would like to join us that evening. So November 29th. The public hearing for 7:35 again, shall we? And if you would please see what you're willing to, now that you've heard some suggestions on both sides, see what you would be willing to support so we can try to bring this to some conclusion at the next meeting.
Okay,
And
we
we'll
want
have-
Ted there too.
Yes, Ted and Dennis and
We-
anyone else
First,
you'd
I
like
think
to.
we have
we've talked
something in
about
writing.
changing here, Robert, and your little proposal, I haven't read all this yet,
Yeah.
but the parts that we've discussed,
So-
make sense to me.
So would you be kind enough to shoot some ideas, email, so we could also try to work on some draft language so that that'll be available, whatever you suggest, Jim, whatever you suggest, Harry. We could at least have some draft language in front of us for those proposals, and let's see if we can get a little closer.
What about having a workshop that's just, you know, kind of an informal, publicly noticed workshop so that the board can keep kind of, you know, brainstorming rather than having to do it all at the public hearing? As Jim suggested.
Yeah, I think that's what.
I thought you would ask for that, and we kind of did it at a meeting a few meetings ago, right?
Yeah, but it keeps evolving and getting more complicated, so it just seems like
We should do it in a
people are
public,
having trouble
in a public
following the
forum
thread
and
of
have a
the
public
different
meeting.
Okay,
discussion
well,
items.
between now and the 29th, when would you like to meet again? When can you all meet?
I'm free on the 22nd.
Okay, that's the night before Thanksgiving, so shall we do it,
You go faster, I won't be here.
the 21st
Keith,
would
let's
be
put it
a
out to January.
Tuesday, is that right? The 21st would be a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So Tuesday, the 21st, Ted is shaking his head
I'm
no.
out of town next week.
You're out of town that
You have
whole
to do it after
Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, I think.
Well, let's see, we're proposing the 29th, what about Tuesday, the 28th? We would have it the night before we continue the public hearing. And in
Yeah.
theory, we would have already gathered our thoughts.
That's fine with me.
Does that make sense? Tuesday, the 28th?
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay,
Tuesday the 20,
8th.
but people who have strong ideas of what they want in this law, they should put those words together in a paragraph or two and send it to you and to Ted,
Yeah.
and let you put it in a document so that at some point, the board has a piece of paper that says exactly what you want,
Okay,
or what somebody proposes.
okay. Thank you, Bill. The same is true of you?
I got nothing I want to add to it, I just
Okay.
want to understand what it's going to ask us to do,
Okay.
and it doesn't really spell it out yet.
Well, we thought it did,
How
but
how about,
disagree.
how about all these listeners out here? I'd like to hear what some of them have to say after listening to all this. There's an old word that works, agita, and you don't even have to know what it means, you understand it.
What time on the 28th? Is it 7:30?
What works, 7 would be preferable, considering it's a holiday week, but if you can't do 7, Jim, we can do 7:30.
7's tough for me, I
Okay.
can come in later.
No, 7:30, we need
So
to
7:30 on the 28th, and then
Include
7:30
this.
on the 29th, right?
7:30, so we're calling a special town board meeting on November 28th.
I'm taking Harry's invitation,
That's a
can I?
Tuesday.
Because I want to prove that I can speak with all my students here, that's not just all show. So
John?
I want to offer just a concrete suggestion before I go, if that's possible. Are we
Yep.
still
Could
open?
be challenged in front of your students.
No, that's fine, you could send them the tape and what, I would say, just to respond to what Sarah has indicated before and what both Councilman O'Neill and McKeon have said about the glories of the thing that actually works on Bard. If you have HLO and then have with parentheses after that, with the exception of the institutional district, then you could allow it to go in the one place it's been successful, right? So if you use the language, the institutional district, which it exists in the code already, right? And make an exception for that within the HLO, then you're allowing it in the one place it's worked. And
What do we do about Sun Myung Moon's property?
That's an institutional district
Yeah,
as
so
well.
what do we do about that?
I don't know, you're gonna have to figure it
Buy that
out.
up and put solar panels all over those fields?
Well, you still have the ZBA to make a decision on that, right, or the planning board. So still, you're by refusing to make an exception for the institutional district, you're banning the one place which has done it successfully from continuing to do it, which seems problematic. So that was my constructive suggestion, you've offered a counter.
In your master plan that's been the subject of some talk lately, do you have in there the fact you want to expand the solar fields and et cetera? Do you know if that's in there?
Imagining the future, I don't know.
But it's not the future that's written in your
I don't know.
next plan.
I don't believe it's included in
I mean,
that.
it's not imminent that you want
It's
to.
No, it's
It's
not
not
imminent.
included.
But it's, I mean, it's such a, such a good, successful thing. I just did a review of our environmental programs and was reading about the award-winning nature of this thing, which Laura's put so much work into.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that as the technology evolves and as we're trying to achieve lower energy usage, being the
Yeah.
highest energy user in the
Right.
town, we could find further ways of doing that, and I would hate to see the town board preclude possibilities for that in the future.
Yeah,
You understand this technology is not forever.
not likely that that's gonna be a game breaker though, no, I don't think so.
No, but it's also like, I hate to see, it's like, both, two of you up there, or three of you are celebrating the success of what we have already, and at the same time saying we're gonna vote against it. That strikes me as a bad situation.
Well, you see
Well,
the,
because of the
I
unintended
like Mr. Ross's
consequences elsewhere.
comment, so maybe we'll get up there, but
Well,
also.
he doesn't want me to talk.
no, I
But
just
thank
want
you,
you
it's
to take
been,
a breath.
let me just say, it's been great for my class to see the town board in action. So, thank you very much, I can't wait to debrief with them,
I
next
told them
week.
they were gonna see some
It'll be,
differing
it was much more
opinions.
exciting than the Red Hook Village Board or the Tivoli Village Board, so thank you very much.
This is,
We haven't even had an audience for 2 years. No one here.
Julia, did you wanna make some more comments?
I do, well, just
Yeah.
very quickly in response to Harry, because I've also been sitting here and listening, and I realize that this is not at all representative of anybody besides myself, and I don't expect it to change hearts and minds, but I don't find them ugly. I find them hopeful. I'm a young mother, I am a professional, we just moved to the area, we had our choice of towns in the area, my husband works in Millbrook, and I came to Red Hook because this progressive nature of the town and a real proactive climate agenda is part of what drew us here. I look at them and I see that they blend, they're not at odds to me at all with the nature and the character of the town. And I think that, I know, I'm building a house in the town. I know other people who are recently moved to the area and who feel the same way. I think maybe to some extent it's a generational shift. And I agree that we should be careful about where they're sited and we don't want them plastered across the landscape. But I don't find them
You want them in
ugly.
your front yard? You said
Yeah,
you do.
I see them and I think, look,
You
this
want
town
them
is
in your
taking
front
action.
yard, but not plastered around, what's the distinction?
Well, that's why we have a planning board, right? I mean, I think that there are sites that are more and less appropriate, but I just wanted to
But the
say that I
planning
don't
board looks to the
personally
town
have
board
an
for
aesthetic
the
problem
tools
with them. I
to
find that
apply.
they're a signal of a shift that the world needs to make, and I'm glad that my town is leading the way.
Okay.
Well, you know my neighbors, and I have several neighbors that have a couple of acres because I live in Tivoli. So you have to have 2 acres where I live, so that as a result, that most people have about 4. So they have room to do a couple of acres of these things on there, but it would destroy the neighborhood. And I haven't even mentioned it to them. And it's I live in Tivoli, so it's Tivoli law comes first.
Okay.
Hi,
Jen?
just one quick one. From someone who does have them in her front yard, on top of my house, I do enjoy looking at them. Because I feel like I am taking the reins on my impact on this world. I don't drain an ounce of energy out of the system. And I think this goes back to the adage of not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. I'd much rather have solar panels in my backyard than have a coal-fired plant. I'd much rather be looking at my neighbor taking the reins on their energy use than have a nuclear power plant within what is really a nuclear stone's throw from here that could be a real problem. Like, it has to happen, you know? So I have them on my front yard. I have them on my house, and I do not find them ugly, and I've never had a neighbor say that they believe they're ugly, and I know they're not ground mounts, but they are on the front of my house. They are what
They're on the roof.
They're on the roof, and that's what I display to the world, so.
Well,
Roof is
So
not
our
everywhere.
law
Oh, roof, I know, it's
our
not
law
a roof, I'm
doesn't
just saying,
cover that.
I find them,
Yeah.
I have committed to them, so.
I built my house myself, it's timber frame, I use $50 a month of electricity on the average. And I do heat with wood, but I used propane to cook with, and that's about all.
Okay.
We all have to do our.
24 hours, so then it's a meter charge.
Any other comments we'll take before we move on to the next items of the agenda? Okay. Very good. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope that you stay with us November 29th. And hopefully we'll have some resolution to this issue. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4. Sorry, agenda item 3.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, we have the Sheriff's Office is sending us an amendment to the agreement. should we decide to contract with them. You've been sent the agreement. Did you have any questions about it? It details the rate change.
So this is something we don't have to, this just keeps them available if we want them, right?
Exactly, but we have to approve this agreement.
The numbers look all right, right?
Yeah,
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is number 4. We received just the other day a revised social media policy, which I think is the result of the communications committee. I haven't had time to review it, which I think means that you haven't had time to review
I
it.
reviewed it this afternoon.
Good for you, Harry. Thank you very much. So we would look to maybe put this on next month's agenda, sorry, next meeting's agenda. But if you have any
This is yours, right? You're okay with it?
input on the social media policy, please send it to both myself and to Sarah, who's the liaison to the communications committee. Is there anything else on that agenda item?
I would just say specifically for the board to look at what we're asking an administrator to do and think for yourself who or what body would fill an administrative role on social media. I think it could be one person, I think it could be multiple people, but that's one of the main things that we're still struggling to figure out how to define in here. So just as you look at it, have that in mind.
Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. Next item on the agenda, agenda item 5, is a draft RFP has been sent to you now, tweaked by our town attorney in consultation with the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. So this draft is now out to our potential partner municipalities. They were reviewing it. And so if you would also be kind enough to review it and see if there's anything that you would like to bring to our attention between now and the next meeting, that would be great, because we'll be looking to, if possible, to have that adopted. This will be the template, and other municipalities will be partner municipalities in that procurement process. This is for the installation and the maintenance of the new streetlights. Okay, if there's no other comments about that agenda item, we'll move on to number 7, which is just in consultation with our highway superintendent. We've discussed maybe extending our parking regulations to our municipal facilities, and specific, I'm referencing Town Hall, our parking lot. During the snow season, we don't want to have cars parked here. And so I'm suggesting that we go ahead and approve this regulation extending signage to the parking lot, which would prohibit parking overnight during the snow season, November 15th to April 1st. That's 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. That mirrors what we have for our streets. And also include in the sign that there be no parking during snow events, and that would be snow events during the daytime, so that they don't have to work around parked cars, whether they're in our regular parking area or our electric vehicle charging stations.
Why don't we
Any
have no
thoughts on that?
parking, well, I'm gonna make one.
Yeah.
As far as the charging stations, there's been a vehicle that parked for a long period of time there, overnight, weekends, and should that be really
I know.
allowed?
I know where you're going with that, yes. We're going to have some signage, or consider some signage for how long somebody can charge. We had always anticipated that, but we weren't going to restrict them from moving the car as soon as it was charged until we actually saw that there was demand to require that. And we're now starting to see people plug in, And so, for example, if somebody needed to charge for 2 hours, they went to work, they dropped their car off, charged it, walked back a couple of blocks, picked it up during lunchtime, technically they might be an hour past charging, let's say. We don't really care about that yet because we're not at the point where there's such demand for the charging stations where we need them out of there immediately. But we are getting close. So yes, we are going to suggest that we have a requirement where they remove the vehicle within a certain period of time after it's completed charging, and that it not be left overnight. Yes.
How long does it take to charge them?
It all depends
How
which
far is
vehicle
up?
you have.
Should we allow
I mean,
what you just said?
What's, takes time, yeah.
Exposes us to a really long time of people leaving cars there. If they have a car that takes 4 or 5 or 6 hours to charge,
Lacy was 6
I'm inclined to restrict the use of it in terms of
But
time.
they have to tell us who they are.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We're not there where the demand is exceeding the supply. When it starts to balance out,
We have to do
you
that.
know, then we can
Yeah, I know.
discuss
I mean, I just wonder-
the best way to proceed.
Woody's-
But
We have
right
to keep
now,
we have to
still
keep
in
that
it.
in mind.
I don't know.
Like 4 hours or something, you keep it open for all the public.
Yeah.
okay,
Could I, Robert, could I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
ask the board, when you're reviewing this RFP, it looks like maybe it got put together a little backwards.
oh, that,
So,
it wasn't stapled
open
correctly?
your book to number 25,
Okay,
Which is that?
pull it apart, go like this, it's gonna make more sense to you.
It's the,
Okay?
it's the RFP for the street.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
something just got assembled. So go to page 25,
yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
Pull it apart, go back,
Goes like that way.
Okay.
right? And that'll make, when
So
you
if I
read it,
start
it'll
at
make
page
more
1,
sense.
I can, when I get to 25, I can make the change, right?
Yes, I just want you to flip
Yeah,
it,
okay.
because otherwise you're gonna say, wait a minute, where's, you know,
Okay.
it's not gonna make sense to you
Okay.
otherwise, all right?
well, 26 comes after 25 in my version.
Yeah, but 26 is blank.
No, but in my version, it was backwards, maybe just in mine.
No, it's backwards in mine also.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so I
just
see
flip
what
it,
you're
you can
saying.
see where page 26
Yeah.
is, so the whole section just needs to flip
Yep.
over, right? All right, just so you don't get frustrated trying to read it.
No worries. Okay, well, I think, is there any further discussion about the parking lot regulations? You know, in our rec park, we have no parking after 10 o'clock. So this would be slightly different than that.
Is this in your local law?
The rec park parking in our local law?
I don't remember.
We'll check. Lastly, we have correspondence. Ken Migliorelli writes us again about Freeborn Lane, and I've explained to him that we still have legal issues that we're reviewing, and that we will be able to address this sometime in 2018.
Robert, did we have to vote on the overnight parking, you know, from November through April to include the,
If you'd like to, sure.
make it
Let's-
part of this,
let's-
the rules for our town roads?
Yes, so,
So that's
shall we
Yeah.
do that?
official?
Are you all supportive of that?
Yeah. So moved, say second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We have public comment, but we don't have a public left. We kept them for quite some
We
time.
wore them out, I believe.
Yes. So at this point in time, I would make a motion to go into attorney-client. Before we say goodnight to the folks at home, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on November 29th.
Do you need a second on the attorney?
I need a second on the attorney-client. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries.